And this will go to Steve Grossman to begin.
Speaking of jobs, when either one of you wins the election, there are some folks in the Treasury, the Treasurer's office, who might be wondering if the axe is going to fall. How will you take a look at How will you take a look at those employees now, and how will you fill certain positions?
I think that question is to me.
Yep.
Based on how they have performed and based on how they will perform. I think we've made many acquisitions over the years in my business, and I've come in leadership positions in not-for-profit organizations and in political organizations. My style has always been to assume nothing, to sit down with every individual who works in the organization, as well as those who are their supervisors, and find out just how well people have done. If people are performing, they should be able to continue to perform. If people aren't getting the job done, or they're deficient, or not measuring up, they should be able to move on, and we should say goodbye to them. There's no way the treasurer, overseeing a little less than 800 people, is going to be adding more personnel. People want less government. They want to save money. So we're going to have to find a way to do a lot more with less than we've had in the past. That's the way it is, both in cities and towns and in state government. But taking a look, doing a top-to-bottom review, looking at every supervisor and every person working in that organization, and then making a good, solid, business-like decision as to whether or not those men and women who have served should continue to serve. I think that's the right approach, and that's the approach that will give us the best possible performance and the best possible efficiency, effectiveness, and use of taxpayer dollars over these next 4 years if I'm privileged to be state treasurer.
You know, people, and rightfully so, have come to not trust government. They don't have confidence in their government leaders, particularly the majority on Beacon Hill, that are making decisions that are not helping our state grow the jobs and create the environment that we need to get people back to work. The Treasury is the place where we manage the people's money. And you need a treasurer who's going to be a watchdog for the people and to ensure that the operation is running efficiently, running to serve the people and not serving itself. That's the problem that we see in government. That's why I'm not taking a public pension, and we need a whole new approach. One of the first things that I will do as the treasurer is do a performance audit within each of the departments of the Treasury that are vast, from the lottery to the school building authority to the wastewater pollution abatement trust. And it goes on. It's become a political catch-all for a lot of functions. We need to do a performance audit, top to bottom. We need to make sure that people are showing up and serving in the role that they're hired to perform, and that they are qualified on the merit to do that job. And I also have said before that we should eliminate the bonuses at the Public Pension Fund. We don't need bonuses to attract good people to the 25 administrative positions at the State Pension Fund who get paid on average of $100,000. It's those kinds of stories that really irritate people, especially in the private sector, who are happy to have their job, earning their way, playing by all the rules, doing things right to save for their retirement and help their kids have a good education. And they expect the same from their state elected leaders and their state government.
You know, the representative during this debate and in previous debates has made some charges. She said I'm too compromised to be treasurer. She's tried to link me to the culture of corruption. So I have a question for her, because I read in the Boston Globe just the other day that she steered $3.2 million of taxpayers' money to a Pork Barrel Road project in Shrewsbury, located 50 feet from her family's own property, in violation of the state ethics laws and in violation of the state's conflict of interest laws. Representative, you call me compromised. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? You are engaged in practices that are up in front of the Ethics Commission, and you fail to file your documents properly, yet you call me compromised?
Okay, this is not a surprise that you're hearing this kind of charge from the former Democratic
from
National
the Boston
Party
Globe
chair.
Representative, from the Boston Globe.
Let me answer. You raised the question.
I did.
From the
former
Boston
Globe
chair,
did. I didn't.
Former chair of the Democratic National Party, who has every trick in the book right in his pocket. It's that kind of attitude that in the link to the majority party on Beacon Hill that people plainly don't want to have more of in state government. Let me answer this question directly. First of all, the only person that has any interest in an investigation in this matter is my opponent. This was an anonymous complaint. 3 weeks before the election. The only person looking for this investigation is the former chair of the Democratic National Party. There is no conflict of interest. There is no state agency or commission that is investigating this matter. There is no financial gain, as reported specifically by the Boston Globe. They also say there is no financial gain, and there was no requirement for a disclosure. My family has been in business in Shrewsbury since the early 1970s. This is a project that has been underway since the early 1990s. I began service in 2000 as a state representative, and there has been no one in my years of service that has made a charge that there was ever a conflict of interest in my service as a state representative until 3 weeks before election, when the former chair of the Democratic National Party raises it.
No, this is just, Karen, you keep making these things up. I mean, you've been making things up throughout this campaign. I did not say this. Andre Estes on the front page of the Boston Globe said things. The fact is that your own spokesperson in that article said that you had to amend your ethics reports because they were inaccurate. The fact is that the state's conflict of interest law says that you cannot act on a matter that affects the value of your property, which is 50 feet away. You can say that it's inaccurate, but the Boston Globe documented it on the front page.
And you're going to believe the Boston Globe.
I'm going to believe the Boston Globe, but don't try to tell the listeners to this station that somehow I've raised this issue.
An anonymous complaint, Steve. An anonymous complaint.
Representative.
3 weeks before election day. You figure this one out.
Representative, this has nothing to do
Let's
with
talk
me.
about the issues. Let's talk about where you stand on taxes.
No,
I know that you propose, like Governor Patrick, about a graduated income tax.
Then Representative,
What is the
let's
high
not
rate?
you- let's-
What is the highest rate that you would like to see on a graduated income
We'll get back
tax?
to this. Kevin Tachi,
Just don't call me
WXDR.
ethically compromised when you have been
Well, the former chair of the Democrat National
You can
Party
do-
in an anonymous complaint
We're
3
gonna-
weeks
we're gonna
before
have to-
election.
all right,
You
we'll
call
get
it
back
what
to
it
this
is.
Later. We're going to have to end this.
I'll call
Kevin.
it the truth, and you can't handle the truth, Representative.
I can handle
quote,
the truth.
To quote
Folks,
Paul
let's-
Salucci many years ago in
There's a
1998,
difference
you
of
can't
opinion,
handle the
quite
truth.
obviously. Okay.
It's not an opinion.
I understand.
Okay.
Kevin.
As candidates, what are your thoughts on the Massachusetts School Building Authority, its creation, and what, if anything, would you change or improve?
Okay, we'll start with Karen on this.
Okay, the school building authority obviously needed reform. When you can see a school like the Newton High North, a $200 million school that really got way beyond the necessities and cost our taxpayers, cost the Commonwealth almost $50 million, a project that my opponent invested $3,000 of his own money to support. And this is why we need reform. And we passed it in the state legislature. I voted for it. And under the Cahill administration, they have now implemented the School Building Authority. It's a good program. It's a good reform. It was very necessary. And I will build upon the successes that are there. We now have a dedicated revenue stream. The sales tax revenue supports that program. We need to make sure that we leverage the sales tax dollars very carefully so that the infrastructure needs, the necessary infrastructure needs across the Commonwealth are met. There are controls, there are incentives built into green technology and materials, but the projects meet the exact necessities of the school system, not the excessiveness as was demonstrated by the Newton High North Taj Mahal. So what I would do is build upon the successes, work with the executive director, Catherine Craven, to continue the good work there. The model school program is also a program that works for communities that want to choose a more time-sensitive project that they can get done quickly and affordably, use the model school program, and give the communities the choices that they need under the school building program.
The School Building Authority was created in 2004 really so that we would never longer ever have projects like the Newton Project. Newton Project was out of control. I live in Newton. I was born in Newton. I've lived a good part of my life in Newton. And that project was flawed. And the rules that are in place in terms of per square foot cost for schools, in terms of architects and designers, in terms of the way it's controlled by Catherine Craven and her team, prohibit that project from ever. That would never be approved under the School Building Authority. And I think you have to give credit where credit is due. That was started in 2004. The treasurer did bring Catherine Craven in. She's done an outstanding job. It can actually move forward, and they just adopted model schools for elementary schools in addition to the high schools, which has been in place. I think it's extremely important, however, to recognize that 1 penny of the sales tax is currently dedicated to school building construction. But if the ballot question that the representative supports, the only person running statewide this year who says that she is going to vote for a 3% sales tax, I can promise you school building construction will grind to a halt. We will not have the schools built in this Commonwealth that we dream about and hope for.
Can I
That
speak to that,
is
please?
a fact, because we cannot maintain a penny for the MBTA and the Turnpike, a penny for the sales tax, a penny for the School Building Authority, and still have money left over. Otherwise, we're going to lose 28.4% of our schools, firefighters, and police first responders budget. That would take the state over the cliff, as the Mass Taxpayers Foundation says. That's something I'm not prepared to see happen.
Let me speak to that. Obviously, we've raised the issue of the sales tax, and I can speak for myself instead of my opponent speaking for me. The sales tax has been 5% for over 30 years in Massachusetts. The sales tax should be 5%. The legislature voted to increase it to 6.25% last year. I voted against that. That was a money grab, okay, because they raised those taxes, but they still cut aid to police, to fire, and to our schools across the state. I believe so strongly that we have to vote yes on question 3 in order to send a message to Beacon Hill to lower the sales tax down to 5%. If the people don't vote for question 3, Beacon Hill and your friends that are in the majority party will continue to feel that raising taxes is okay. It's not okay for me, and it's not okay for a lot of the taxpayers out there that are working hard to make ends meet. And the big difference between us on taxes is in 2000, during the internet boom, my opponent wrote out a check for $25,000 to fight the rollback of the state income tax to 5%. The people voted 60% to roll back that state income tax to 5%. And because they did so, the legislative leadership rolled it down to 5.3. If they didn't, then my opponent and his friends on Beacon Hill would continue down this path of raising taxes, which is not working for our
Okay,
state.
Steve, do you have a response?
I do. We have a clear difference of opinion on what happens if question 3 passes and we wind up with a 3% sales tax. I think at some point you have to say, we got to respect the will of the people. Representative said last night on a debate that we had with Emily Rooney on Channel 2, she would, quote, not acknowledge the voters' will, close quote, if question 3 passes. I think that's a mistake. And I think it's fantasy land to think that almost 50 new state representatives and state senators are going to go up to Beacon Hill next January, and as their first vote as new members of the legislature, they're going to vote to overturn the will of the people and move the sales tax back to 5%. If we have a 3% tax next January with a $4.5 billion deficit in the budget, in Somerville, which is where my business is located, most densely populated city in the Commonwealth, we will lose 43 of our 152 firefighters. You can do the math in Brockton, Middleborough, anywhere in Plymouth County, or anywhere in Massachusetts. We will lose reading specialists, we will lose teachers, and the quality of public education in this Commonwealth will suffer. I'm not prepared to see that happen.
Yeah.
We're number one on Race to the Top.
Thanks.
We need to stay there.
A couple things here. I think it's fantasy land to think that the Beacon Hill leaders, your friends there, will ever lower taxes unless people vote for question 3. The scare tactics, the sky's going to fall, local budgets will be decimated, was said before on the state income tax. The people voted for it, and they rolled it down to 5.3. It's the same thing now. The only way to put pressure on Beacon Hill is through the question to get it down to 5%, the same rate it was before last year. In our local budgets and our school districts were functioning okay at 5%, and that's where we need to get it by. And, you know, I think about the small businesses out there, the ones that I have visited up on the New Hampshire border, whose parking lots are empty because of the alcohol tax and the sales tax increase, both of which my opponent supports, and I don't.
Okay, thank you.